The following program is recommended by the National Education Association.
It's a paradise, the best of the island in the Caribbean.
For me, Puerto Rico is everything.
The center of the struggle is Puerto Rico, and it's the center of the struggle of my life.
I love Puerto Rico with all my heart and soul.
I don't know. It's music.
The Spanish Caribbean, sensuous, intriguing, exotic. And its small easternmost gem, Puerto Rico, rich port in Spanish, brings a wealth of color to our portrait of America. To Christopher Columbus, it was the earthly paradise, the very gate of heaven. Soon after its discovery, Puerto Rico settled into centuries of isolation as the drama of Spanish conquest moved west. Here it is, an island smaller than Connecticut, 1,000 miles east and a little south of Miami. In time, a unique culture developed here, a blend of things Spanish, Indian, African. Then in 1898, American troops took possession, and today, Puerto Rico is a U.S. Commonwealth. And it's still being invaded, as the winds and snows of mainland America bring 1 million tourists a year to the north coast city of San Juan. They come looking for that same earthly paradise described by Columbus. And for those for whom paradise is a strip of beach in the trade winds, they find it. But others are seeking something more elusive. They are out to see Puerto Rico and all the exotic promises of a Spanish Caribbean island. And so they venture among the wildflowers and waterfalls of El Yunque, a tropical rainforest. Or walk through history, the catacombs and bastions of the fortress El Morro, where for 400 years the Spanish fought off English, Dutch, and French invaders, only to lose Puerto Rico to the Americans. Others find exotica in old San Juan, its streets cobblestoned with the ballast from Spanish galleons, its old world plazas and cathedrals. But But beyond the tourist district, the luxury hotels, fine restaurants, souvenir shops, Puerto Rico comes as something of a surprise. Primitive, it isn't. San Juan is a modern metropolis, the crossroads of the Caribbean. Everywhere on the island can be seen the sights and sounds of Americana in the financial districts, the industrial parks, the burgeoning suburbs. Here is an island with a strong middle class, one that many would like to see become the 51st state. Today, it is a U.S. Commonwealth, protected by the Constitution. This is a part of America. Its people, American citizens. They eat our Big Macs. They die in our wars. What is less apparent is the soul of Puerto Rico, as Spanish Caribbean as it is American. Unlike most Americans, Puerto Ricans are citizens by conquest, not by choice. And for most Puerto Rican Americans, it is important to remain just that, Puerto Rican Americans. A culture 5 centuries in development, Puerto Ricans want to hold on to that heritage, to preserve the language, customs, traditions, yes, but deeper still, the sense of family, of community, the hatred of intolerance, and more, that Caribbean love of life that seems to wink at obsession with success and failure. For it is those qualities that gave them the strength and spirit to build the Puerto Rico of today, and to continue to confront the cultural and economic problems of a small tropical island aspiring to the same dream as the richest nation on earth. That dream is nurtured by the Puerto Rico just out of sight of the visitor. The song of the coquí. It is the song of Puerto Rico, sung everywhere. From the dark corners of ancient fortresses to suburban backyards. From lowland pastures to the central highlands. Seldom seen by the tourist, the highlands are a land of perpetual spring, of plentiful water, fertile soil. Once a place of refuge for both the Indian and the colonist, it has never known war. It is the spiritual home of Puerto Rico. Once it was a true home as well. But for Puerto Ricans, migration has become a fact of life, and that fact challenges a people once so close to this land. Long centuries before the American West, there were horsemen here, descendants of settlers from Spain, Corsica, the Canaries. They were called the Jibaros, a people who have come to symbolize those qualities Puerto Ricans hold closest to their hearts. Free and arrogant, human, affable, just, generous. For centuries, they lived as subsistence farmers in isolation, far from the Spanish elite of the coastal cities, far from the drama of colonial Spain. In time, an agrarian society developed, centered around a dark, rich coffee prized in Europe as a delicacy. The coffee still flourishes, yet few are here for the harvest. Why did so many leave the highlands? When did this saga of migration begin? To answer, we must go back to the turn of the century, to 1898 and the Spanish-American War. It was called that splendid little war, the last grand gesture of manifest destiny. When the battleship Maine was sunk in faraway Cuba, few in Puerto Rico imagined that they too would be liberated by American troops. For only 7 months earlier, they had been granted autonomy by Spain. Yet when Old Glory flew over the port of Guanica, few who were there imagined it was not for the better.
Well, the Puerto Rican people received the Americans with open arms. They wanted to have them. There was no fight. There was no opposition. Everybody was contented and very happy with the American coming to Puerto Rico.
Mucha miseria había antes.
There was a lot of misery before. If you were on the streets after 8 p.m., the police yelled, "Who goes there?" You had to say, "Paisano," then show your passbook. If you didn't have one, you went to jail. Spain had a cow they didn't know how to care for. They milked it so often, it nearly died from malnutrition. When the Americans came, all they said was, "We come to help you. We come to help you. Don't worry, we come to help you."
While schools, roads, and hospitals were built, the main form of help was an overhaul of the old method of farming. The concept of agribusiness was introduced. And for the new American investors, it was sugar that held the most promise. By the 1920s, most of Puerto Rico's farmland had been bought up by large corporations and converted to cane fields. Food, once locally grown, would now have to be imported on a large scale. And for the Highlanders, the new emphasis on sugar meant coffee would decline. And so would a way of life that had thrived in isolation for 400 years. For the first time, they knew hunger, unemployment. But of greater consequence was the need to leave the highlands to seek work, shoulder to shoulder with their darker-skinned brothers in the cane fields. Or farther still, to New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, setting a pattern of migration that endured for years. Yet many remained, and over the years, some have returned. Angel, a boy who spent years living with his grandmother in Chicago while his father struggled subsistence farming in the mountains of Utuado. To see Angel's Puerto Rico is to understand why he came home.
In Chicago, I used to visit my aunt or go to school. Most of the time, I would be locked up in my house. This is when I got the urge to come back to Utuado, so I would not be locked up like an animal in a cage. I love this place because I have more freedom. I can do my work, pick coffee, work with the chickens, cows, horses. Everything that has to do with nature, I love to do.
Now Angel works with his father building a farmhouse on 5 acres of land. Their new cement home will be modest but spacious and will boast a magnificent view of the highlands. It's a family affair.
The reason I love Utuado is because of its tranquility, its farms, its mountains. If I had to go to another place to bring up my family, it would be a little difficult because I would not have the same things I have here. If I cannot find work, at least I have the vegetables from my farm, so my family is able to eat. If when the children grow up, they want to leave, I can't hold them, but at least they will know how to farm.
That they might stay is the hope of Puerto Rico as well. Agriculture is taught in the highland schools, but they must also prepare for the world beyond the mountains.
There was an emperor
We
of
teach
China.
the children English, Spanish, mathematics, social studies, and science to prepare them for the future. The main problems that the children experience when they migrate to the United States or from the United States is that they never get a sense of belonging to a culture. They have problems with language, then they have problems with adapting themselves there or here, and it's hard for them.
But resilience and adaptability have long been Puerto Ricans' strongest traits, keys to the survival of their culture. An earlier culture survives, but in memory only, that of the Indians, who were once the only inhabitants of this island. They left their marks in these caves.
Bueno, a mí me encanta llevar toditos los hermanos míos.
I love to take my brothers here, so they will learn about the Indians and the important things they left behind for us.
Mira, ¿qué es? Indio.
Y que aprendan también.
I also
y
want them
ellos
to
van a ser
explore
un
the caves
explorador,
without being
algunos de
afraid,
ellos. Van a ser un explorador, vayan a buscar por una cueva.
to feel just as if they were in their home.
En la misma casa.
Courage from a brother. Someday they too may venture beyond Utuado. What would lure them? What would they find? Today, the Highlanders would not find work in the cane fields, for sugar production has gone the way of the ox cart as islanders shifted their priorities to industrialization. It's hard to mourn its passing, a legacy of low wages, underemployment, that dealt Puerto Rico in the 1930s the severest blow of its existence. Former Senator Roberto Rexach remembers when it was called America's poorhouse in the Caribbean.
We had many problems. In the first place, we didn't have a middle class, which means that we didn't have a developed our human resources, really. In the second place, we had a problem of unemployment affecting more than 40% of our population. We had a very low educational level. We had health problems as reflected in a life expectancy of less than 40 years.
But they had faith in God and in a poet from the mountain village of Barranquitas. His name, Luis Muñoz Marin. As a young man, he had lived the bohemian life of Greenwich Village, but when he returned to Puerto Rico, he returned with a dream, to bring new life to his people. In 1938, he formed the Popular Democratic Party. Bread, land, and liberty was their slogan. Integrity was their style. In the past, voters had literally sold their votes to the pro-sugar interests. But Muñoz spread the word. To sell your vote is to throw away your machete. It was a stirring grassroots campaign and the beginning of a political awareness that has grown to the point where 85% of the people vote, a figure that should embarrass the rest of the nation.
Muñoz was our first political leader really concerned with our social and economic problems. He had many answers to many questions that people were asking. He was honest. He was straightforward. And besides, he kept his word. So people trusted him, and they voted for him.
For years, Puerto Rico had been ruled by mostly ineffective American governors appointed by the president. Few even spoke Spanish. Clearly, a half-century of rule from Washington had not solved the island's severe problems. And in 1948, they were permitted to elect their own governor, Luis Muñoz Marin. Through his efforts, Puerto Rico was declared a commonwealth, free to fly its own flag. Though controversial, the new status gave Puerto Ricans the measure of self-rule and self-respect needed to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, an effort Muñoz Marin guided until he stepped down in 1964.
The whole idea of Operation Bootstrap was to bring in what we didn't have, that's capital. So that with that capital, we could put to work what we really had. That means labor. At the time, it was inconceivable to industrialize a Caribbean island. So what did we do? Well, we set up 3 or 4 industrial operations. We brought in people from the States, investors. We showed them the island, we showed them our scenery. And then we showed them how well factories were run by Puerto Ricans. And then we invited them to come in, and they usually did.
It was ingenious. It was inspirational. From America's poorhouse to America's showcase in less than 2 decades. From an island as poor as Haiti to one with the highest per capita income in Latin America. Today, the grandchildren of cane cutters and coffee planters design computers, assemble pacemakers, test pharmaceuticals. Once Puerto Rico was held back by an 80% illiteracy rate. Now, 1 out of 4 go to college. Indeed, 1/3 of the Commonwealth's budget is spent on education. The technological capital of the Caribbean, Puerto Rico still produces some of the world's finest rum. Economic growth continues, and Puerto Ricans still hold industry as the key to progress. But few societies emerge from rapid industrialization unscathed. And with the death of Muñoz Marin in 1980, many felt the loss of something else. In his final years, he had spoken of the need for serenity. Serenity. The words spoke of long ago values, of simpler times when neighbor knew neighbor, when one tongue was spoken, when church bells marked the passages of every man's life. For the old poet, that spirit seemed as possible today as it was yesterday. And for many Puerto Ricans, it is more than possible. It is essential. Few Puerto Ricans would close the door on progress, and yet, as the pace of life quickens and material desires increase, there is the fear of the loss of those older values. It's a trend that Americans everywhere are familiar with and question. For Puerto Ricans, their strength and spirit derives from tradition, especially that of community. Suburban life presents a new challenge to preserve it. To serve the new centralized population, suburban developments are built. The new communities are secure, modern, affordable. The largest middle class in Latin America has embraced the suburban life no less than Middle America. Shopping malls sprout everywhere and flourish. Working hours, once marked by the sun, have conformed to the sacred 9 to 5. And yes, for Puerto Ricans too, there is commuter traffic to complain about. Yet most, like mainlanders, would swear by suburbia as an ideal place to raise children. There are others, however, who long for housing centered around the traditional structures, like the plaza, designed to encourage things like idle gossip, flirtation, things not quite cost-effective for the suburban developers.
Puerto Rican belong to a culture where their identity comes from belonging to a group. Like the Japanese, they will forever be happy if they're in a group, and they will be most unhappy if they're alone. The plaza reinforces that community idea. There, old people gather, young people gather, and they will forever feel that they have identity with that crowd. Alone, you can't find a Puerto Rican ever alone.
The design of the plazas came with Columbus, a design universal in Latin America, as universal perhaps as the gentle dramas played out in each of them.
When I was growing up, we always looked for Saturday nights. Saturday nights were the nights when all the girls and all the boys in town would go to the plaza. The girls would circle one way and the boys would circle the other way. You would look for the nice fella you wanted to catch his eye, you know, and he may give you a little note, or he may give you flowers, or he may say something nice about your anatomy, which you appreciated tremendously. And it was something to look forward to.
Many Puerto Ricans remain aware of the role that plazas, cathedrals, the traditional structures have played in shaping their society. There is a heightened urgency to preserve them, for these are the last legacies of Spain, reminders of the culture that holds them together. Today, there is a cultural renaissance in Puerto Rico, inspired, among other things, by the restoration of old San Juan.
I feel the Puerto Rican culture is endangered, and it should be preserved in every aspect. As to restoration work, it is the way to preserve the physical aspect of this culture. 2 decades ago, not everybody cared about the old city. Then lately, with all the restoration that's going on, a new life has come into the old city. Old San Juan is an architectural masterpiece, and I'd like to take part in shining it up again.
Antonio and Esther Alvarez are architects who have foregone lucrative work in industry to restore a building that dates back to the days of the conquistadors. It came complete with cannonballs.
Well, not all the banks are willing to finance this kind of projects because of the risk involved. The collateral is a ruined building that has no value for them.
What might appear as a ruin for a banking institution is really a treasure for the people of this island.
Today's Old San Juan is one of the most beautifully restored cities in the hemisphere, and a source of great pride to the islanders. More important, it is a living city, one whose ancient design perpetuates the most essential aspect of Puerto Rican life, the sense of community. What do a people lose when they lose that sense of community? Why in Puerto Rico especially is it considered so essential? Perhaps the answer lies in Ponce, Puerto Rico's second largest city. Staid, classic, conservative, a main port of the island's south coast. Here we find proud suburbs, a lovely plaza, and a museum of modern art given by industrialist Luis Ferre, a former governor. It also includes Playa de Ponce, a waterfront neighborhood. Here we find a people struggling against hunger, poverty, and unemployment, struggling to renew their communal pride. It is the home of a community center founded by Sori Sulina, a Catholic nun and the sister of former Governor Ferre. Her no-nonsense approach has inspired the waterfront community to take a new look at itself. Though Puerto Ricans have made great strides, there is still poverty on the island. Here in Playa de Ponce, the failure of a local sugar refinery and the decline of shipping have caused high unemployment. Just as in mainland America, it affects a community's sense of self-worth and sets up a cycle of despair that's hard to break.
Well, you see, when you don't have anything to look forward to, when you don't have the opportunities, then you become discouraged. You become defeated yourself. And what we try to do in El Centro is try to give respeto y dignidad to the person so that they know their worth. And because of this worth, then they're able to do much better.
Her first efforts were directed toward the toughest converts of all, the community's delinquents. Boys like Torpedo, whose search for respect and dignity often got him into trouble.
In fact, they came twice to our offices and they stole from us. But his mother came that day and they were so embarrassed and they said, put them in jail, take them away. And then I said, no, that's not the way. You have to, stand by your children right now.
I was in a lot of trouble. The sister talked to me about my problems and said I shouldn't bring them into the community. So I decided to straighten out. But I owe it to her. She counseled me and showed me right from wrong.
We gave him the chance to go into the photography because we have a very good teacher there that could kind of talk with him. And it really worked.
It also changed his relationship with his friends. They see me with the camera and ask me to take pictures of them laughing and talking. Then I tell them I want them to pose. I want portraits, real portraits. And I don't want them fooling and joking around. I think they understand now, because when the pictures are developed, they are really anxious to see them.
Our motto here is, the glory of God is man fully alive, man and woman fully alive. We're trying to make everybody know that somebody believes in them. To us, photography is a way of learning, to learn the reality of their lives around them, to make them also beautiful. And it was in the Metropolitan Museum of New York. We had this exhibit. And people came around and looked at the houses and said, oh, what ugly houses. And this little girl came over and said to this lady, oh, no, that's not ugly. That's my house. And that's a beautiful picture if you look at it.
Despite the growth of the suburbs, Puerto Ricans are still drawn to their plazas, but less for moments of quiet flirtation and more in response to salsa festivals held throughout the island. It is the high mass of musical events, and if the plaza is the chalice, salsa is the wine.
alegan que fue maestra. Oiga, no me venga con eso tú ahora.
Salsa is the most popular form of music on the island. It cuts across lines of class and age, and like the Puerto Rican people themselves, is a blend of things Spanish and Indian and African. Listen, the lyric from the Spanish, the drum from the African. Hear the drum, feel the drum. For the drum was to the African what the bell was to the European. It celebrated, it warned, it called together. And even today, it commands a response. The idea of community extends to all races in Puerto Rico, and the inclusion of the African has given it a unique vibrancy. The mixture of the races dates back to the 16th century when African slaves were brought to work the cane fields to places like Louisa, an isolated village on the northeast coast. Once a holding area for slaves, it is unique in that it is one of the few villages that remains predominantly black. But like every other Puerto Rican town, Louisa celebrates the feast day of its patron saint. For Louisa, that saint is Santiago, St. James, also the patron saint of Spain. Contingents carrying statues of the saint meet and join in procession through the village. It's a religious event, but it's more than that. They come from all over the island to join the blacks of Louisa. People of all shades dress as white knights or African devils or something in between, something natural for a racially mixed culture. Puerto Ricans speak with pride of what this African heritage has brought them. The stamina to work long hours, the spirit to confront hard times, the sensibility to shrug off intolerance, and two, a special beauty. You can see it in the faces, but if we could look deeper into the soul of the people, we might find a philosophy so joyous, so seductive, it's almost subversive. And it may well be Puerto Rico's ultimate gift to the rest of the country, the celebration of today. We find reflections of the origin of this philosophy in the marketplace, among the native yucca, the oranges from Spain, the plantains from Africa. Here in the stall of the spiritualist are found potions and herbs for success on the job, voodoo dolls and prayer cards for success at the racetrack, holy water and spray cans for success in the bedroom. Caribbean magic. While most Puerto Ricans do not frequent the spiritualist, it mirrors what is expected from the one celestial marketplace they do frequent, the Catholic Church. Hormigueros, the Church of Last Resort, the Church of Miracles. Here, pilgrims ascend the ancient stone steps on their knees, a somewhat painful request for divine intervention. And for Puerto Ricans, an unlikely one.
The people enjoy the celebration of the church, and they see with joy the church involved in these celebrations. They are religious, and they believe in eternal life. and they believe in God and in Christ, but they pray. If they are in problems now, they pray. They pray because they want joy and to enjoy life here. But I don't think they pray so much because they are thinking of eternal life or eternal reward.
Few have accused Justino Cruz of worrying about eternal life, which is not to say he does not pray. Even now, he sings a rosary, the fulfillment of a promise to the Virgin Mary, usually pleading for the health of a loved one or a better job. This rosary is in return for one small favor, a winning lottery ticket worth $8,000. It bought the land he now owns. The ceremony complete, Justino and his friends can enjoy the fruits of spiritual contract. And so it is that almost every ritual in Puerto Rico, no matter how pious an intention, becomes a celebration. Here is a people who struggle against poverty, against racism, who have lost more men per capita in our wars than almost every state in the Union, celebrating life whenever and wherever possible. This spirit has sustained Puerto Ricans through centuries of hard times. It calls across the ocean to us. Ten calma. Take it easy. Be patient. Life is good. If many things unite Puerto Ricans, one issue divides them. The question of what Puerto Rico should be, a state, a commonwealth, or an independent nation. By far the largest number of people support a continuing relationship with the United States, roughly divided between those who favor today's commonwealth status and those who seek statehood. A smaller minority believes that only independence can preserve the island's culture. And even for a group of journalists used to clarifying the issues, agreement is hard to come by.
Puerto Rico should be independent because there is really no other solution if we want to remain Puerto Ricans. I don't think that the United States would accept Puerto Rico as a Spanish-speaking state, and even if they did, I don't think that Puerto Rico could remain a people, a country, like we are right now, under the tremendously greater assimilationist influences that we would have under statehood.
It's not even doing it now when we're not a state. Now,
We're
losing it.
We're losing
You
it.
take a look at the language. The language is very frequent what we call Spanglish. That you find very few people who can deliver a straight sentence without throwing some anglicized phrase into it.
Well, but that is happening in many places in the world. Mexico right now has a tremendous campaign because supposedly all of these anglicisms are being thrown in. I don't think that that is the basic thing of the culture.
That's only a manifestation of what I'm talking about.
When you walk the streets of Puerto Rico, any town of Puerto Rico, you'll find a lot of American influences in their customs and mores, but you still find a lot of basic Puerto Rican traditions that are being observed by the Puerto Rican people. I just got back from a trip to Latin America, and I quite frankly found more American influence in Panama than I have found in Puerto Rico.
That too was an American colony, or that too is an American colony. I think,
Well, you can't say Spain is. The most popular television show in Spain was Dallas.
Yes, of course. Of course this is happening, but on the other hand, I think you really have to look at the fact that If Puerto Ricans are ever going to achieve any kind of equality like Sylvia is talking about in the United States, we really have to stop being Puerto Ricans.
My solution would be statehood, because I don't think that independence is a viable alternative. I don't think it's viable economically. I don't think it's viable politically. If I can be part of the greatest nation in the world, why should I settle for anything less? We would have 7 congressmen, which is more than 26 states right now, and we would have the 2 senators, which every state has. We would have a hell of a lot of clout. We really would.
You would have 7 congressmen out of 435. You would have 2 senators out of 102. This is merely theoretical.
Well, supporters of Commonwealth feel that they're living in the best of 2 worlds. They don't have to be a state in order to participate in federal grants and aid programs, to be a part of a very strong economic base economy. And at the same time, they are preserving their culture by not being a state. So if we were to become independent, we would lose all that manufacturing capability. We would probably end up being an intensely overpopulated, incredibly impoverished little island in the Caribbean.
We are American citizens. We've been so since 1917. We didn't choose to be American citizens. We were made American citizens. But this is a fact. We already are. And I feel I am an American citizen, and I want to be a full American citizen. I want to participate fully in the processes of the nation, as I believe a lot of my countrymen want to do too.
The people of Puerto Rico, or at least the great majority of the people of Puerto Rico, agree on one thing. Puerto Ricans are a people. This is a country, this is a nation, this is a culture that has to be preserved. This is a way of life that has to be preserved.
I would like a Puerto Rico where you would be able to sit down and talk to your brother as a brother, and again, not get involved in a darn political argument.
Amen.
If Puerto Ricans are dramatically divided on this one issue, nearly everything else in their culture unites them. Things like Discovery Day. Bagpipes from northern Spain extol Columbus's discovery of Puerto Rico, the only place under our flag where the great explorer actually set foot, and Puerto Ricans are universally proud of that distinction. For if there is division in Puerto Rico, one result has been a healthy, introspective look into those precious distinctions they share with each other as Puerto Ricans and as Americans. America is a nation of precious distinctions in our land and in our people. E pluribus unum, from the many, one. It's the thing that makes us unique, unites us, and inspires our portrait of America. Join us again next time.
Portrait of America, a comprehensive learning system, is available for classroom use from Raintree Publishers. For information about this video encyclopedia, call Raintree toll-free, 1-800-558-1580. That's 1-800-558-1580.